And I am the Director of Americans for a Safe Israel. Today we have another educational Zoom meeting for you, and we know you're going to enjoy it. We have as our guest David Ha'ivri. David previously held an official position as Councilman and Deputy Head of the Shomron Regional Council. These positions give him puts him in the position to have a good read on the upcoming elections and how the outcome will affect Judea and Samaria. David has led hundreds of geopolitical and cultural tours in the Samaria region to influencers such as U.S. Congress members of Parliament from Europe and Great Britain, as well as numerous clergy, academics from across 5 different continents. David's tours are focused and very effective, leaving all visitors positively changed in the way they view Israel. Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs and Public Diplomacy, which is now called the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, quickly realized the effectiveness of David's tours as an important public relations component in the fight against BDS and the detractors of Israel, and eventually became a partner in many of his tours. David was educated for his tour guide certification in Jerusalem's prestigious Yad Yitzchak Ben Tzvi Institute for Israel Studies. Before that, he had earned a BA in Middle Eastern Studies and a master's in Israel Heritage, both from Ariel University and Samaria. We'll also today get a taste of an Israel mission with David Ha'ivri, and a preview of the upcoming November AFSI Chizuk mission, which we are announcing now publicly that is being scheduled for November 9th through 17th with a possible optional add-on at the end for the Chaya Sarah weekend. So without further ado, we have a lot of exciting information to cover. I give you David Ha'ivri. Hi, David.
Hello, Judy. Hello, everyone. Judy, thank you so much for that introduction. It is always a pleasure to meet AFSI members and to speak in AFSI gatherings. And of course, it is a great privilege for me to lead as a tour guide the AFSI mission to Israel. I had that opportunity about a year ago, and I am so enthusiastic and excited about the planning for the upcoming Chaya Sarah AFSI mission to Israel in November. And welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be part of this meeting today. I don't need to introduce myself, as Judy has made such a great introduction. Thank you so much. We are now facing another election in Israel. After a short break in election processes, we haven't forgotten that we had 4 elections in the course of 2 years, and now we're having a 5th. And obviously, we're all here together because we are all very concerned with the future of Israel and the future of the heartland of Israel, Judea and Samaria. I've lived in the Samaria for over 30 years with my family, with Mali and my children, and I have been active in the public sphere in Judea and Samaria for over 3 decades. And I've seen the change together with you, the members of AFSI, who have followed and follow every day in the media, in the newspapers, coming to Israel, reading articles, writing letters, speaking with the representatives who come to Israel. And you are typically the fiercest fighters for the safety of Israel and the future of the land of Israel. And together we are all concerned again. Now we have elections coming up. What will this bring for the heartland of Israel? What are our concerns? And what are our hopes? I'll tell you some 3 decades ago, when Israel started direct negotiations with the PLO, and we were so concerned with where this would lead us. And of course, all the different governments of Israel, to some extent, have engaged in this process over this period of time. But I remember at that time, in the early 1990s, when the Oslo process began, and the opponents to our efforts to settle the heartland of Israel, to build up the Jewish towns in Judea and Samaria, and to secure our future in Judea and Samaria, our opponents, those people who founded the Oslo process and led it with the concept of the two-state solution, at that time, 30 years ago, they said the Jewish settlers, as they call us, the Jewish residents of Judea and Samaria, are almost 150,000. We need to act really quick before they pass that line of no return. If they get 150,000 residents in Judea and Samaria, we will not be able to establish the two-state solution. We will not be able to carve away this land from the state of Israel. So now we are 3 decades later, we are aiming for 1 million. We're not too far. We're much closer to 1 million than we were at that time. We've passed the 150,000 line many, many years ago. But at that time, they called the line of no return, of setting Judea and Samaria as part of the state of Israel forever. So Baruch Hashem, we have succeeded in building up what we've built today. And when you come to Israel, and when we drive through Judea and Samaria, you will see that ongoing development. And of course, I'm speaking about this because this is our concern. Our concern is, will the incoming government somehow put their foot on the brakes? Will they stop this development? Will they do even worse? Because as we've all discussed, and we read in these news coverage of the different representatives who are putting up their candidacy to run in the different parties, there are those who are proposing, as if nothing has happened over the past 3 decades, they're saying, oh, let's move forward with the two-state solution, even though we're nearly 1 million residents in Judea and Samaria. So of course we are concerned that these elements might get the strength in these elections to somehow hurt our existence in Judea and Samaria. And it's a real concern. It's a real concern. But again, when we ride through Judea and Samaria, when we get on that AFSI bus and we go to Hebron, and we go to Eli, and we go to Shiloh and Itzhar, and we visit these places, especially those of you who have been here many times on the AFSI trips, we see that there's a constant growth. Those numbers are growing. We passed that 150,000, and now we're passing the 700,000 and the 800,000. And we read with concern that there's a building freeze. We hear that our leaders here, the leaders of our municipal governments here, are always lobbying and rallying the government in Jerusalem to allow us to build new homes. And when we read those reports that the government has approved 250 homes, the New York Times and the CNN, they call it settlement units. They've allowed us, they've given permission for 251 new settlement units. Of course, they mean new homes for Jewish people in Judea and Samaria. That process, over these past 30 years, has almost always continued. Sometimes there has been periods of freeze, where they've frozen, they've not allowed us to build those new homes in Judea and Samaria. To the shame of leaders who I will not name by name right now, but you all know who they are. There were leaders who we expected more, and they put the brakes. They froze our building in Judea and Samaria for certain periods of time. You know that in Judea and Samaria, we have power groups that are building up strength within the different parties. When people ask, should we be supporting the Likud, or should we be supporting the Ayelet Shaked party, or the National Religious Party? Who is the best party to support? Well, we need our strength in all of those different groups, because they're all going to make up of the government. And even in the outgoing government now, who of course we are not happy with, because they joined forces with very negative elements in the Israeli society and provided funding and support to those elements who should not have been in our government. But even within this government that we weren't happy with, still we had points of support, and the building went on in Judea and Samaria. Not as much as we would like, but still going on. I was in Hebron yesterday, and in Carmel and Susia. I rode on the roads, and we see massive new highways being built by Israel in Judea and Samaria. I passed through the Gush Etzion junction, where you remember there was a circle, a traffic circle. That circle is gone now. They're putting up a traffic light. That's huge progress. We've got to be the craziest people in the world. We celebrate when the government builds a new traffic light. Oh, they're building a new traffic light on Road 60. There's a new traffic light at Shiloh. There's a new traffic light that's just been installed at Eli. They've just started work on a new traffic light at Rechilim. All of these junctions that were so dangerous. But again, 30 years ago, the roads were a third of the width that they are now. And this has expanded and grown in spite of the different parties that have been in power over the different periods of time. And even our most beloved political leaders, I'm sad to say that at times have failed us and have not been as strong for the land of Israel as we had expected. Which kind of brings us back to us, to the AFC mission, to the AFC supporters who question those politicians, who put them to the test. You, and of course our Israeli counterparts, the people who vote in the elections here, and the people who sign up and are members of the different parties and active in the different parties, and build up those power bases persistently in order to reach those goals in Judea and Samaria, to place us again and again in that point of no return. If the Yossi Beilin of history said if they reach 150,000, that's going to be the point of no return, and now we're 750,000. And being that we're 750,000, being that our towns have grown so much. When I first came to Kfar Tapuach in the Shomron 30 years ago, there were about 30 families who lived in the town. All of the children of the town from grade 1 bussed out to other towns. And today, there is a school in Kfar Tapuach that when it was first established, some 8 or 9 years ago, for the first grade, they studied in trailer homes, in temporary dwellings, in temporary buildings that you are so familiar with. And then when they had the second grade, we brought in another trailer home for their classroom. And then when they had the third grade, we brought in another trailer home. And finally, when we had, the school was from grade 1 to grade 6, and then we got the government gave funding to build a permanent building for the school. Now the school is overpopulated. The government in Jerusalem has approved the extension of the school, the new wing of the school. So originally they built a building with 12 classrooms. Now there are 16 classrooms. We have some of the children learning in temporary trailer homes. And groundwork is being done now for the construction of another 12 classrooms of permanent building. So now we're not even talking about bringing out another trailer home and another family. We're talking about building institutions. Being that the population in Kfar Tapuach, and this is just an example of what's going on in all of the towns in Judea and Samaria. We have so many new schools and new kindergartens that we have built. So at some point, when you have the numbers of population, then the government must approve the permanent building of the educational institutions. When you have the educational institutions, of course, you need to employ staff. When you're employing staff, then you have more workplaces and more people are coming to live in these towns. The bottom line is, yes, we are very concerned with who will be elected, and we are very upset when we see irresponsible people in our government making sad statements in regard to the Temple Mount, in regard to Jerusalem, in regard to Judea and Samaria. But the bottom line is that we are setting facts down on the ground. I once had, Judy spoke about the tours, the geopolitical tours that I gave for influencers in the Samaria. I once had a journalist from AP. He was actually the head of the AP desk for all of the Middle East. And he comes to Israel for 2 days every year to meet his staff. He has a big office in Jerusalem. He has permanent staff in Jerusalem. He has a smaller office in Ramallah, and he has another small office in Gaza. He comes for 2 days a year to meet all of his staff. And somehow I got him to come out for a tour of the Shomron, where I was the guide. So I took him to Itamar. And when the yeshiva of Itamar, the Hesder yeshiva in Itamar, was under construction at that time, if you remember, the yeshiva was built in honor of the Fogel family, of Rabbi Udi Fogel, who were massacred by the terrorists. We drove up to the yeshiva. It was under construction at that time. The builders of the yeshiva, they used only Jewish labor. There were only no Arabs working on that building. And they built in such a way that they had all of the different teams working at the same time. In normal circumstances, when you build a building, you build the frame, and then you build the walls, and then you do the floor, and then you do the walls, and then you do the lighting, and then you do the windows. But they had decided that they were going to complete the entire building for the yahrzeit, for the year of the Fogel family, to have the great memorial event in the new yeshiva building. So everyone was working there at the same time. Nothing was done. Everything was under construction. The main frame of the building was built, but all of the development outside, the parking lot, the garden, the steps, that wasn't in place yet. So we drove our car right up against the building, and we got out of the car. We had already been spending a couple of hours together touring different locations. When we got out of the car, and this journalist got out and he looked at the building, he looked up and he looked down, and he said to me, "You people intend on staying here forever." It dawned on him while he was there in London, writing emails to his staff. He himself had imagined that the so-called settler movement was a temporary phenomenon. He was publishing these pictures of beaten up trailer homes and calling this settlements, and he had tricked himself into believing that we were here temporarily in these broken down trailer homes, and all they needed to do was say "foo," and we would be gone. But when he got out of that car and he saw this millions of dollars that we are investing in building permanent buildings of education for hundreds of students who are going to study here in the yeshiva, it dawned on him that we are here to stay. And this is one example of how this tour changed the outlook of someone who is not our friend. Of course, people who are on the borderline, who are not sure, who come and see what is going on in Judea and Samaria, they are changed. They are moved. Now, the motto of the AFSI tour that was coined by Helen Friedman, Zichronah Livracha, of blessed memory, she said the AFSI tour goes to those places where no one else goes. We go further out to those distant places. And that's the truth. AFSI for over 25 years, at least twice a year, aside for the COVID, at least twice a year, you've come to Israel and toured the country, and especially to Judea and Samaria, and gone out to those further hilltops, to Oz V'Gaon with Nadia Matar, and to Gush Katif, and to the Shomron, the Samaria, and to Itzhar, and all of those very, very distant places where tour buses don't go out there. Now, again, I can tell you from my experience, when I first came out to the Shomron, even Israelis, even national religious people didn't make it out to these places. It was difficult. It was scary. We were under attack. The roads were not very good. There was nowhere to stop. You couldn't even bring a tour bus out to Judea and Samaria 20 years ago because there was nowhere to stop. There were no public restrooms. There was nowhere to buy a drink. There was nowhere to sit in the shade. And your group, AFSI, as a leader, as a Nachshon, as that one who jumped into the sea ahead of the camp, you led the way, and you are leading the way, because first of all, you came out to Judea and Samaria, and you set down a foothold, and you met with the people. And it's a great, great encouragement to the people in Judea and Samaria when they see friends of Israel, Jews and non-Jews, who come to Israel, and you're here. The tour groups aren't coming out. I'm now a professional tourism. I'm certified by the Ministry of Tourism. For many years, when I was leading the geopolitical tour in the Samaria, I was doing that as a service with the Shomron Regional Council, with the municipality, with our local government. At some point, we were recognized by the Ministry of Public Diplomacy, and they became our partner. But I wasn't in regular tourism, and I wasn't seeing the tour buses. Now that I have been educated in tourism, I realize why tour groups are not coming out to the Shomron. First of all, because it's difficult. Regular tour guides, there are about 8,000 tour guides in Israel. Tour guides, they want the easy, they want their job is hard, and they want to take the easiest track they can. The easiest track is going out to places that they are familiar with, places that they have experience with, places where there's no chance that their tourists will have a rock thrown at their bus. AFSI was never concerned with that. Of course, they were concerned. Nobody wants to get hit by a rock, but that never stopped AFSI from coming out to these places and showing support to the pioneers who are out on the hilltops in places like Givot Olam and Itamar and all of these places in Judea and Samaria. So really,
really have to worry about rest stops because we had friends whose homes we enjoyed frequenting and visiting and getting to know these people, which is really what sets, I mean, other than the fact that we currently are the only group that goes into these places, we have the feeling of the trip is a very different kind of feeling because we don't go sightseeing. We visit, we see progress, with the different NGOs and with the different people that are our friends and we correspond with them all the time and we bring them here when we can. Now, David, I didn't want to cut you off. However, we had said we would, one of the things that I'm sure a lot of people in our listening audience would like to hear about is, do you think that there is one coalition or another that would be better for Judea and Samaria?
Obviously, the answer is that we would rather a right-wing coalition, people who are committed to the development and the protection and preservation of Judea and Samaria, people who understand the importance of investing Israeli resources into building up Judea and Samaria, and see this as a part of the land of Israel. Of course, we want a government that will declare sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. Israel was established in 1948. The Jordanians invaded the heartland of Israel in 1948. They took control of the Samaria in the north and Judea in the south, and most of Jerusalem. When they say East Jerusalem, they're not talking about East Jerusalem. They're talking about North Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, South Jerusalem. Almost all of Jerusalem is the area that was controlled by Jordan until 1967, the miracle of the Six-Day War. When Israel liberated Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria in 1967 in the Six-Day War, the government of Israel declared sovereignty in all of Jerusalem. The government of Israel declared, this is our capital, this is the state of Israel. But sadly, to this day, 55 years later, the government of Israel has never declared sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. The government of Israel.
So things are still in flux, and obviously neither side has really made a successful effort. I just want to take you back to talking about the upcoming trip, the kinds of trips that we do, and you've given me some ideas. We've discussed some ideas for what we're going to be doing. So can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, we can talk about that. And I'm going to tell you an experience that I had this week in Shiloh. Shiloh is the first capital of Israel. It's the place of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan. It's the place of Eli the Kohen in the book of Samuel. The book of Samuel 1 tells of Samuel, the prophet. His mother Hannah prayed at the tabernacle in Shiloh, and he became the prophet there. I was there this week with some women who were my tourists. I guided them in the Samaria and in Judea and Jerusalem in the old city. We were there at Shiloh, and I met a group of students who are studying to be tour guides. In Israel, the tour guide program is very intensive. I did it 2 years ago. It's an amazing program. You learn everything about the land and the history and the architecture and the theology of all of the religions that hold Israel as holy. While I was there at Shiloh, I met a group of students who are studying to be Israel tour guides, and I had a chance conversation with one of them. He is an Israeli Arab. He lives in Dir Khana in the Galil. He's been a bus driver for 30 years in Israel. He has 4 children who he sent to university. 3 of them are doctors today, and 1 of them is a lawyer. He sent them to school and paid all of their education. Very successful. And he said to me, up until I did this course, until I was educated about the heritage of the Jewish people, I had no idea. I was totally ignorant. I thought Zionism was a modern invention. And only now have I learned this year in these studies the wealth of the Jewish heritage and the connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. This is an Israeli Arab speaking. He says, my children are doctors and lawyers in Israel. They're Israelis. They went through the Israeli educational system in Arabic. They have no idea. So this is just an example of how important going to these places and learning the heritage of the Jewish people in Israel and the connection of the Jewish people. Judy, in our tour, we go to those places that other groups don't go. And if the other people have started coming to the places that we've opened up with AFSI, then we go further out to further places. And we go into the homes of our friends. AFSI are friends of people who live here in Israel. If we have 15 people on the bus or 30 or 45 people on the bus, we are going to go into the home of Ilana Shimon at Chavat Gilad, and she is going to take us into her kitchen and serve us coffee with her family, and we're going to see the kids running around, and we're going to see her laundry, and she's going to tell us about her issues with electricity and water, because we are their friends. And we're going to find that same hospitality, that same family atmosphere wherever we go. This is the AFSI experience. It's not a regular tour. We're not competing with Israel Tour 2020 of the whatever Israel experience, or the Jewish Federation, or the temple, or the synagogue, or whatever it might be. This is really connecting with people in the land.
We talked a little bit about the kinds of places that we might go on the November Chizuk mission. Do you want to give us an idea? Because you had it kind of mapped out. We mapped it out together. Some of the places are new to AFSI travelers.
Yes, I suggest that I think it's a good idea. A lot of our people on the AFSI mission are people who have been here before. And so on the one hand, we have a dilemma. On the one hand, as I just spelled out, we have a lot of friends. AFSI have a lot of friends. There are a lot of people who are waiting for AFSI to come back so they can invite you into their living room. And we can't, over the course of 8 days or 10 days, we're not going to be able to visit all of our friends. And we're not going to be able to go back to all of those places that we've been before and see again how they're doing. We're going to need to skip over some of those places. On the other hand, there are a lot of places out there that we haven't seen yet. And we'd like to see new places and see new developments and meet new people. So I'm looking at going down to the Negev, to Mitzpe Ramon. And on the way to Mitzpe Ramon, to see some of the ranches that are the Jewish Israeli-owned ranches in the Negev, who are protecting our national lands from the encroachment of the Bedouins, who are trying to take over the entire Negev. And to be at Mitzpe Ramon, which is pretty amazing too, to go and visit the yeshiva that is so remote and is drawing in students from all around the country who are with their backpacks going all the way down there. When we go on the bus, you'll see how far away it is. And also visit homes of people in Mitzpe Ramon, who's a totally different population than those who we met before, and learn from them how they find their livelihood down there in the middle of the desert and why they've chosen to live so far away. We're going to go to the Eshelim solar energy plant in the Negev, where they are producing energy from the sun. And this energy plant has become a model that Israelis are marketing in other places around the world. They have a new installation that they are managing in Dubai. Can you imagine that? Israeli scientists, one of my neighbors at Kfar Tapuach works, he travels almost every month to Dubai for work at the solar energy plant. That is now a branch of the solar energy plant in the Negev. Can you imagine that? A religious Zionist settler with a big bushy beard and a big kippah is going once a month to Dubai to take care of their solar energy plant. I think it's pretty amazing. We'll go to Sde Boker. We'll go to the Dead Sea. I don't know when the last time AFSI had the opportunity to dunk in the Dead Sea, but we should, we should enjoy Israel too. We're working hard. out there supporting the heartland of Israel, and we'll check out the Dead Sea. We'll go to Jerusalem, we'll spend the Shabbat, maybe find a neighborhood that we haven't spent a Shabbat in before, and do a nice walking tour on Shabbat in the afternoon and learn about that place. I'm thinking about a very special neighborhood to suggest for that. Being that we're in November, Shabbat is out early, so we will have time to go to the Machane Yehuda on Saturday night and check out the nightlife there, which is a totally different experience than Machane Yehuda in the middle of the day. It's like a different place altogether. Of course, we're going to visit the Temple Mount and see what's going on in the Teret Kohanim. The city of David has become a huge enterprise. They have multiple locations, and they are building a new park in Gebe Hinnom, where they have an agricultural village. They've established an ancient agricultural village that is operational, so we can see how our forefathers grew their vegetables for Jerusalem 3,000 years ago, which is pretty amazing. And we're going to go up north, and we're going to visit our Druze friends and learn about how programs that they are doing for the Druze veterans of the IDF to set them on their way for their livelihood in high tech in Israel. So we'll go up to the Druze villages in the Carmel, and also check out some interesting places in the north. And of course, we'll be in the northern Shomron. Now, we've been in the center of the Shomron and in Benjamin many times, but we should also check out what's going on in the northern Shomron, and there are some really important projects happening there too. And we will also make it to the center of Shomron and see a new discovery of a Israelite village from 3,000 years ago that has now been discovered and was hidden under a Jordanian army post. That's just a taste. There's going to be a lot more details when you come out in November. What I would like to encourage everyone here, not only to sign up for the tour and to come with us, but also let your friends know that this is a Israel experience that you're not going to find on any other Israel tour. So even if you've been to Israel before, you should definitely come out, and you should definitely join the AFC Israel mission. Yes, Leon, I know you want to go to Evyatar, and we're going to support Evyatar if we're there and if we pass by and say hello, but we're going to support Evyatar for sure.
And of course, the many other Nachala settlements that have come up within the last 6 months or so. Starting July 20th, I believe, there have been 7 or 8 new villages that have gone up. We choose to call them villages or communities rather than settlements. So, David, without jumping around too much, I know people have questions for you about everything you've discussed today. Helene, would you like to get started with some of the questions?
Sure. There's several questions related to Benny Gantz. Jordana Jacobs asks about Benny Gantz's comment in the Jewish press on July 21st. I will read it so that you can hear it. That's not it. Okay. Anyway, he said he was happy to sabotage the settlements in Judea and Samaria. Add to this question, Gantz has been particularly biased against the towns and Jewish land designations in Judea and Samaria. He favors Arab land seizures and illegal building. He has agreed to put Arab communities on the main road between Jewish communities. Do you think he can be outed? Do you think his party can be excluded how would that affect what's happening in the elections?
Okay, first of all, before answering the question regarding Benny Gantz, my advice to you is not to vote for Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz is not.
They're totally apolitical. David is speaking for David.
Well, most of us
Totally.
are not Israeli voters. This is,
Exactly.
you know,
That being said, Benny Gantz is of course all of the politicians, all of these parties, they're speaking to the people they think might vote for them. So we can find very similar things that they've said and done, and we can find some outrageous things that they're saying. And typically, if they're saying outrageous things, they're trying to bring in voters from the party to the left of them. Will he actually do that? Is he saying that? By the way, Avigdor Lieberman, to get votes, he said some really, really outrageous things that he's never acted on in the Knesset. A lot of them have done that. Can we exclude? Can we hope for Benny Gantz to be excluded from the government? We can surely hope for him to be excluded. So far, since he's joined the government, he's been there. Netanyahu included him in the government. He's been in the last government. Of course, it depends on how much power he brings in with his party into the next coalition negotiations. My hope is that he has a smaller position and not with less influence.
can you
We'll see what
speculate?
happens.
Can you speculate on how much his voting power will be? That party's power will be? Do you think it will be reduced, or do you think it will be strengthened?
There are a lot of parties there in the middle center, the center right, the center left, who are competing on the same votes. So typically they're saying similar things, and they're trying to get the same people to vote for them. It's really hard to speculate what to expect. Surely now, when the elections are in November, it's really hard to say how this will wind up. But what we have seen over the past 4 elections is that we keep coming up with very similar results, which we're not happy about. We'll see where that leads us. And in the meantime, we keep putting down facts on the ground, which I guess is more important. And we keep growing, and we're going to go out and see some of that growth and the facts we're putting down on the ground.
To piggyback on that, Larry Banuk asks if you think Bibi took a back seat in Likud, could they lead the coalition government?
Yes, I think so. I think that could have happened in the last coalition negotiations. Of course, Bennett took advantage of that, even though he had a very small party. But Bibi insisting on being the head and the only candidate for prime minister. Bibi has burnt a lot of bridges. He has too many people against him. The parties outside, he's got people who worked for him. Bennett worked for him. Avigdor Lieberman worked for him. Gidon Sar worked for him. Yoaz Hendel worked for him. These are all people who were in his office. They worked for him, and they refused to sit down with him, and now they all have their own power bases. So if Bibi would, I believe that if he would step back and let someone else from his party lead, that obviously there would be a right-wing government that was led by the Likud. I don't know how to describe what he's doing if he is afraid that if he doesn't lead, if he's not the candidate for prime minister, that his trials would end badly for him, or if he is just megalomaniac and he must be at the top of the list always. But that's what he's doing, and that's the situation we're in now. And he deserves a lot of credit for a lot of amazing things that he's done. But we're in the current situation, and he has a lot to do with that.
In today's Arat Sheva, Nadia Matar and Yehudit Katzover write that the right wing needs to get out and really, really work on this election and get to every town and village and meet people and get out and really get out the vote. Is that something that you think would make a big difference?
I think that it would make a big difference. You know, we just had the primaries in the Likud party. There were also the primaries in the National Religious Party, whatever that is today. But in the Likud party, our friend Atta Farhat, the Druze from the Dalit Carmel, he's the deputy mayor of the Druze village in the Dalit Carmel, and he was a candidate. In the Likud, there are seats that are reserved for different smaller segments within the society, and the non-Jewish sector has a reserved seat, which means that someone who's running for a reserved seat can get that seat with less votes than he would need for the national list. Atta was a candidate, and I supported his candidacy. I think he's a very, very outspoken and loyal Zionist. He's a very smart guy. Sadly, he wasn't appreciated by enough of the voters, but he remarked after the primaries that people who were elected for the list stopped campaigning after they were elected, and that's sad. Now they're in the list and they're just taking the ride. Of course, if they want people to vote for their party or people to vote at all, they need to go out there and motivate the people. Now, there are activists who go out there and do that work. In the Shomron, there's the Likud Sheli, our Likud. There's a group that's led by Yossi Dagan, my friend, who is the chairman of the Shomron Regional Council, together with two other leaders from Har Bracha. And together we have about 10,000 members in the Likud. But they take the members of our group on the election day and leading up to the election day, and they knock on doors in other places. Aside for calling all of our people, we have a very, very high percentage of outcome of people coming out to vote in our community. We have over 80, 90%. It's almost complete. But our people go out. Sometimes we send hundreds of people to Ashdod, to Ariel, to places where we know that people are right-wing supporters, but they need that extra push. And our activists come and knock on their doors and say, you have the right to vote, you haven't voted yet. We're not telling you who to vote for, but would you like a ride? Let's take you to the voting booth and make your vote. Because we know in that particular area, those people are going to vote for one of the parties that we need in the coalition.
That's wonderful. Our friend, this is on a slightly different note, our friend Leon Smedra was very concerned about an article in Arat Sheva today that, quote, 140 Israeli filmmakers boycott the Shomron Fund, part of the apartheid mechanism. How can we in the US fight against BDS and claims of apartheid while some Israelis support it?
Leon, first of all, thank you for that question. I saw your question and I'm glad that Judy reminded me. The Shomron Film Fund is a great, great accomplishment in itself. And I think that we should include, Judy, I think that we should somehow include the Shomron Film Fund somehow in the AFC mission to meet up with them, maybe see some of the work they're doing, hear about how they're doing it. It's a huge, huge accomplishment. The Shomron Film Fund is a government-funded fund of scholarships for filmmakers. The government of Israel has money that it allocates for Israeli films. And there were 7 funds that are all funded 100% by the government of Israel. Our friend Yossi Dagan, the chairman of the Shomron Regional Council, together with other people on his team, succeeded in getting the government to recognize our fund, our film fund, as the 8th film fund that is funded by the government of Israel. Because his claim was that the other funds were boycotting. The other funds were not financing films that were made by film creators in Judea and Samaria. The joke on these 150 filmmakers is that they're boycotting a fund that is not giving them money. So they're not boycotting the fund. The fund isn't even considering giving them allowances, because this fund is made for giving allowances to filmmakers from the Samaria and Judea, or filmmakers from anywhere else in Israel, or even filmmakers from outside of Israel who are making films in Judea and Samaria. So this is a great, great accomplishment. I'm not worried about these filmmakers who are boycotting. They're missing out. They're missing the party. I'm not worried about them at all. The fund is actually financing creators, filmmakers that are making films about the Judea and Samaria, or filmmakers from Judea and Samaria who are making other types of films. It's really great. But more so, Leon, if everyone was on our side, then we wouldn't need to do anything. Of course, we need to be out there and we need to be making our stand, because there are Jewish people and even Israeli people who think otherwise, like those politicians who we mentioned again, who want to sabotage Judea and Samaria. If there was no one out there sabotaging Israel's claim to Judea and Samaria, we could go to the beach.
That would be nice. We like the beach.
We're going to the Dead Sea. We'll do that.
Okay. A question just came in from Jane Foss, which goes back to what we were talking about before. What is your view on why no one wants to work with Bibi now? What did he do that burned all those bridges? Was it a difference of vision for Israel or his way of leadership?
I do not think that it's his. I do not think that it is a dispute on his vision for Israel, although Bibi has not been as outspoken as we would expect him to be on Judea and Samaria. I think that Bibi, we like to make fun of the Palestinians and say, quote, Abba Ibn, and say that the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. But I must say, sadly, the 4 years of the Trump administration was such a great missed for Israel. Had Bibi declared sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, Trump would have said, all right, we'll see what happens. We'll see how that plays out. He wouldn't have objected. So that's a huge, huge missed opportunity. And of course, we are disappointed that Bibi didn't take that opportunity. But why have so many? I had this conversation with Mort Klein the other day. He said, how did the Bennett stab us in the back and go with the Arabs and all of that? But a second later, he said, but Bibi is also a backstabber and he stabbed these people in the back. He caused this situation. They worked for him. Gideon Sa'ar, Avigdor Lieberman, Naftali Bennett, Yoaz Hendel, and others who worked for Netanyahu and now refuse by any means to cooperate with him.
All right, I'm going to kind of close us out with Robin Ticker's real tough question. She wants to know your position regarding changing Rabbi Kahana's organization's designation as a terror organization so that there is no longer justification for the slander and bad-mouthing and harassment of Ben-Gvir and his supporters in the right-wing settlers and Nachala movement and youth. Now, is Otzma considered a terrorist organization at this point?
No, it's not. It's not. So it's not. I understand maybe that you see some connection between the different groups that you mentioned, but none of them are tagged as a terrorist organization. Rabbi Kahana sadly was assassinated, and he was never considered a terrorist. So it's just semantics. There's nothing here that's stopping Itamar Ben-Gvir from running for Knesset. Michael Ben-Ari was a member of the Knesset. Nachala is not connected in any way, and a whole bunch of other organizations that are operating freely. So in de facto, it's not designated as anything anymore.
Didn't Osma just merge with religious Zionists?
I think that they have merged or they're running together, or I'm thinking because I still hear that there are different types of negotiations going on with both groups, but currently they're working together.
So I guess we can just say that you can expect the unexpected when it comes to Israeli elections. It's always a work in progress, including after the elections. So I just want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank David for enlightening us about the election ins and outs, and also for letting people understand a little bit better what kind of trip what kind of mission we are on when we go on an FC mission. And I hope to hear from some of you who are interested in being a part of this kind of travel. It's exciting, it's enlightening, it's educational. It's not for first timers, but it's life-changing. It's life-changing. It will leave you feeling completely different about the state and completely closer to the heartland of our beloved Israel. So again, thank you. And I wish everybody a wonderful day, good evening, and